trying to think. Let me think of the best intro. I think we'll just kind of start off casual. So, episode 1. You guys ready?
I was born ready.
Born ready? All right. No, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I'm glad to have you guys on here tonight. And basically, you guys know this already, but for our audiences, tonight, first episode of the podcast. Everyone, if you don't know, my name is Ace, and I'm joined here with Cam and TY. And today's topic, and the reason why I wanted to get you guys brought along with this is because we're going to be talking about G-Unit. Talking about G-Unit, talking about some hip-hop, talking about, of course, the man himself, 50 Cent, you know? And I don't know if I shared this with you guys, but the whole reason why I wanted to bring this up was because, this is almost a month ago. I was on Twitter, and I when I'm on Twitter, I find myself kind of in the hip-hop side of things, and there was I caught this thread, and there was a lot of people kind of going back and forth and talking kind of about the relevancy of 50 Cent, talking about the relevancy of 50, the unit. Now, and I have to say, and I know this could vary, but the particular thread that I was looking at, it was very dismissive. It was very, a lot of, just kind of disregard to what that era was like for hip hop. And I could, and I'm not saying that it's not exactly correct, but, because in 2021, speaking about it, I think especially if you're younger, it's easy to dismiss. You know what I mean? It can be very like, oh, I don't know who that is, or I don't know what that impact was, but we were there, which is definitely why I wanted to bring you guys on the conversation, is because we were kind of growing up during that time when they were at their height, at their peak, So, yeah, I think we'll kind of just start there. Can you guys remember, I guess, or at least I'd like to have your thoughts on like G-Unit itself. Like what's your memory when you think of it?
You brothers have created something so nasty.
Take your time. I mean,
why you want to go first?
I mean, it's up to you guys. I said, I can start. Go ahead. Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, when I think of G-Unit, like when you say G-Unit to me, the first thing I think of is the clothing. I remember the commercials. Specifically, I remember the commercial. It's like 50 Cent. I think he's like in this like abandoned dungeon and he's working out. And he's, jump roping, punching bag, all that. And these little kids is watching him, and so that. And as he's sipping some water, he turns to look at him. And they all like, oh, he saw us. And they running away. And then you just see like the G-Unit, like the logo and stuff like that for the shoes. Like that's what I think of. But I was curious, and this could be anything, is it a particular artist? Is it 50 himself? What,
Are you sure it wasn't vitamin water he was sipping on?
It could have been. It could have very well been. There's that too. We'll get into how big the G-Unit brand expanded in its marketing later on.
Well, I'll say for me, when I think of G-Unit, I think of their music. I think about how they came together, and 50 started the group. I think about him. I think about Yayo. I think about Banks. I think about the great music that they put together, and just the classes that they had during that time. During our time in the little era that we had. To me, that's what I think about when I think about G-Unit, is just the music in general.
Music in general.
Yes.
And like the huge amount of impact that because and I think kind of how I was starting this too was talking about how big of an impact. So I think maybe that'd be a good place to start. Is you guys have to understand, for the audiences that weren't around then, I think what made G-Unit kind of special in its own way at the time was, I think, just the amount of success. You know what I mean? Like, It was, even for someone, because, we were kids. We were, like, we weren't, like, young, but we were still kind of, growing. And so we didn't understand, album sales and all of that. But there was this kind of inherent kind of, like, feeling that, like, man, these guys don't lose. Like it was just like, or if it wasn't that,
it was back-to-back hits, like,
yeah,
just left and right, knockout punch. Every single album was just a straight banger.
Mm-hmm. Like every time, and then they had this. I'm not gonna say that they all sounded the same, but there was this kind of dark, kind of gritty, but at the same time club banging type beats that you could, it's something that you just knew instantly, like, oh, that feels like a G Unit track. I'd say that for sure.
It kind of reminded me of like the Godfather vibe. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like you had all these members and everything in the group and everything, and you had 50 the leader and everything making his hits and everything. But again, it had that Godfather like vibe to me with the whole group.
The whole group.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then another thing I wanted to say is that also, during that time, we had Ludacris, we had Nelly, we had Ja Rule at the time that was dominating.
Yeah.
And especially Ja Rule, he was really big. He had a lot of songs with like R&B artists and things like that. So when 50 came onto the scene, it was that gritty gangster stuff back, East Coast stuff back on the scene. So this was something that was never seen before. And then you had a guy that had a bulletproof vest on, you know what I'm saying,
All
had
the time.
guns all the
the
time,
time.
the do-rag, all that. So his whole persona was something different for the rap game. So it was just
I would
like, oh
agree.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
50 was a breath of fresh air during that situation.
Yes.
I would agree, and then the whole G Unit thing, because again, nobody was really doing rap groups, during that time period that 50 came out and everything. So it was a whole different vibe hearing all these people that just had that, that real gangster East Coast vibe to them was just so different than hearing the single rappers we heard all the time.
Yeah, no,
right.
I mean, I think I would have to agree with that as well. And kind of, yeah, I never even thought about it like that before, but you're right, because I would say, like, like gangster rap obviously was a thing that had happened the decade previously. Like, like if we're talking like the early 90s for sure. But
Yes.
I would say as that era was kind of dying down and as we enter this new area, 50 kind of, like T.Y. was saying, is the whole persona and the image was almost like an updated. It was like an updated, new and improved like resurgence of that new spin
Of
on
that-
it going forward.
of gangster. Yes, I would
Yeah.
say it was an East Coast gangster vibe,
Right.
and it was a
And-
whole different thing.
And I
Yes.
think it was also, I mean, and I've always thought this. Maybe I'm wrong, but like you go into like the late '90s, early 2000s, there really was this kind of like East Coast sound. Like, yeah, you had your Jay-Z's. I'm not taking anything from Jay-Z. He could be raw and uncut, but I think of people like DMX or like,
Yes.
Big Pun. I think of what's Sticky Fingers' group?
Onyx.
Yeah, the Onyx. Like these groups and these rappers that were coming out from the East Coast in the late 2090s. I mean, it was real aggressive and just gangsta. And I mean, previous years you would have seen like Wu-Tang, but still, I think there was very much a emphasis on just that hardcore.
Yeah, that
sound.
hunger,
Yeah.
hunger that drove them, and I think that's what you saw with 50 and everything. They had that hunger to keep going and going. I think obviously when rappers have been in the game so long that they sometimes get complacent, and the music doesn't really reflect that hunger they used to have when they were younger and grittier.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. Well, and then I will say too, I think also what might have played a role in this, since we are kind of starting about the impact of G Unit and then also kind of just like what it was like when they first were coming up. But I would say, and you guys can share your thoughts on this too, but do you think that like it was kind of inevitable that 50 Cent would have a kind of the attention on him just for the fact, because if you think about it, I mean, having the backing of both Dr. Dre and Eminem, like, Eminem obviously would have been relatively new to the scene as well. We're talking he would have come out mid 90s to the late and just dominating. Like, obviously, this was a hip hop phenomenon, with Eminem's, probably I think he would have had like maybe 2 projects out at that time, and then
the 2 or 3.
in the years coming up, like early 2000s is when 8 Mile would have dropped. So he was still riding his success, and then with Dr. Dre, who well-known name in hip hop, but then with his album coming out in 1999, the 2001, his name was popping up again too, and and with his label, so I would say that definitely played a part, as far as like boosting. Oh, who is this guy that these two are supporting? You know. So your guys' thoughts, like.
You brothers have created something so nasty.
Well, when he came on the scene and everything, it was MTV, watching the early stuff and everything,
Yes.
and you see this dude's, pop up and say, "Go, go, it's your birthday." It's like, who is this new cat on the scene and everything? I never heard of this dude and everything.
And you're talking
He's
about in
working
the
in the
club, right? Yeah,
yeah, in the club, yeah, and everything. You know what I'm saying? You just see this guy on MTV just pop up and everything. He had this greenness that, it's like, oh, this is new and refreshing and everything. And this is a club banger. Like I said, you can go to a club and hear the song too. Then obviously you see, him working in the lab and everything, with M there too. It's just like, man, like they're supporting this dude out of nowhere who I have never heard of.
right.
And so, what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And even to this day and everything, people still listen to that song just for, oh yeah, it's a birthday song, what I'm saying? Go, what I'm saying? People are like, oh, it's happy birthday, play that 50 Cent song. That's what I hear all the time still.
Oh yeah, that being referenced. Yeah, I can see that. I can see
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure, definitely an amazing track, And I think
Mhm.
Dre produced that, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's produced Dre
I'm,
beats.
I assume he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, for me, I remember the first time I heard of him, and I remember I heard Wanksta. That was the first time I heard.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I remember I was like, man, this song is like the first time I saw him, I just kind of knew, like, man, this dude about to blow up. Just something about him just told me, like, he's about to blow up. So when I heard Wanksta song, and then that was at the time where, the whole him and Ja Rule beef, kind of got started. And then there was also, he had mixtapes out too that was in the street. So that was kind of rising his buzz as well. And so when In the Club song came out, that was just, it was over after that. Then it was just like, okay, where's the album? We ready for his album now. Where's this album at? And he just took off after In the Club. Like, once that song came out, it was just like, it was a wrap for the rap game pretty much. And he basically just took over from right there.
Yeah, that first album, that official album he made
Yes.
for Aftermath and everything, and that was just, that was a masterpiece. I'm not gonna even lie about that.
Yes, and it was a masterpiece, and it was just like, I think like that song had came out, and I think it was like the next month, like that's when the album came out, so it was perfect. That was like the perfect strategy. Like, the song was
Yes.
buzzing, and they're already buzzing for you, so it's like, okay, we're gonna drop this album, and then once the album came out, it was just a classic,
Yeah.
instant classic.
Yeah, it was.
Mhm.
Yeah, so timing for sure.
Yes.
And you're exactly right. I was looking up, doing some numbers and stuff like that, and first 50 Cent album a studio album to come out on Aftermath was called Get Rich or Die Trying, and I was looking up some numbers. His album ended up 9 million copies sold. 9 million copies, and that's the thing. I know the hip hop game, currently has changed. I was doing some numbers, and it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind, the differences, because like nowadays everything is based off of streams. Like your Spotify streams or your Apple Music plays, and and I don't know the exact translations. They try to translate it out to what it would be, but like just so people that like maybe are not aware, like the some numbers that I pulled up for like two modern artists like Donda, Kanye West's Donda, right? I think it was last recorded. I think it had about 313,000 album sales, and that's with that's kind of like with the streams, and I'm sure it's rising, but like compare 313,000 for what's a pretty well known and established hip hop artist in current day to 9 million. 9 million, not even close in album sales. And I get it, I'm not gonna try to say that one's better than the other. That's not what I'm trying to get at, but I'm just trying to say like just the explosion of just not only attention but just popularity that first album made. As your debut album, that's pretty amazing.
That is.
And just to put on top of that, Ace, it was about 872,000 copies sold the first 4 days.
Oh wow! So
Just-
so he almost broke 1 million, not even within a week.
It was the first 4 days it was sold out everywhere.
Damn. Yeah. So yeah, that just different era, just different time, and I'm trying to think too what else besides like In the Club for sure. Obviously, I'm trying to think of some other favorite tracks from that album. I know. Well, 21 Questions was on that with Nate Dogg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That, I like
You,
that
yeah,
song.
you. Well, again, you love Nate Dogg, so
Oh
that's
yeah,
not
yeah.
really fair.
I'm kind of
That's
West
not
Coast
really a
biased over
fair.
here.
That's not really a fair
Well,
argument
you know,
there for
people,
you.
people listen to this don't know, but like we'll get into it a little bit later. But you know, I will openly admit that I do have somewhat of a West Coast bias. You know, that's kind of the hip hop that I gravitate to. It's kind of the hip hop I get into, and it kind of relates more into the story, you know, later on. Because believe it or not, even though I'm the one that brought up this topic, had you asked me about 50 Cent and G Unit around 2007, 2008, I was not a fan at all. Well, I'm just gonna say it like that. We'll get into why, and we'll you know, we'll talk a little bit more. But other than that though, before we move on, anything else you guys will talk about? Get Rich or Die Trying, 50 Cent's popping up.
I mean,
The songs that pop up to me, obviously, is Mini Man, because again,
Yes.
that was a
Oh
great
yeah,
hit.
yeah. That's
Yes.
another good one.
yes.
You know, Mini Man was a great hit, and obviously we gotta do the PIMP. Like, come on,
Oh yeah,
like,
with Snoop Dogg. Yeah.
well, come on now, we can't
Oh, yeah.
we just can't forget about PIMP out of nowhere.
And you know what? That's actually that. Thank you for bringing that up, because that kind of also one point that I would say too, that like not only did hip hop, or not hip hop, but not only did 50 Cent, like not only was he making, you know, musically, he was making, you know, a buzz and he was making noise, but like I would say that there was so much attention on him at the time that, and again, this was pre, God, you know, not to sound old, but this was pre memes, right? So like nowadays somebody can say something and it can take off like instantly, right? And it can just, you know, and it can become a meme, get spread out. Back then it was a bit slower, so it might have been just, you know, maybe it was a TV show that was referencing, maybe it was a comedy skit, maybe it was a parody, maybe it was something that like there was like a news special, you know, and then it would take off slowly but surely. TV was definitely, rather than the internet, TV was definitely the pusher of getting stuff mainstream back then. And so the reason why I'm saying all this is because when you said PIMP, that song in itself, I think that you started seeing people like spelling out things. You know, like you would see people,
I
or
can see that.
people would say like I'm PIMP, you know, or they would start making these little things, and they're all referenced to 50. Now I think they would eventually get so ridiculous that they get lost. You know, they'd be doing their own thing, but the original source would have been 50 Cent, and I think, you know, then you start seeing like I remember, like I can't remember specifics, but there's tons of like parody movies or maybe comedy skits where like you would see people doing ridiculous things like, oh, I'm 25 cent. Or I'm 5 cent, you know, or I'm 10 cents and 2 quarters. All of these comedic jokes, they all are because of 50 Cent. Like, you know, that's just how much his name was being widespread out there, you know. So, yeah, there was just this social buzz and hype over the guy, you know. I mean, it was just definitely present, you know, whether it be parody or real, you know. It's just it's crazy. Plus,
It was a hype time and everything, and the fact that he included each one of the original members at least on his album, at least once on his album during that first album, at least give them a little bit of shine too.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you talking about like the G Unit members? Yeah. No,
Yeah, he had Buck, he had Tony Yayo, and he had Lloyd Banks on his first album, just to give them a little bit of buzz too.
Right.
yeah, and well, and I'm glad you brought them up too, because that can kind of transition into a thing. So, you know, we've pretty much talked about like the idea of 50 Cent coming onto the scene. We've talked about, you know, a little bit about, you know, how much of a success his first debut album was, but you know, the other part of this topic too is G Unit itself. You know, that is G Unit is basically 50 Cent's group, but it's also 50 Cent's. I mean, it was his brand. It was, you know, clothing line. It was the label. The label itself was called G Unit Records. I mean, so I will say this, you know, 50 Cent, despite his, you know, we talked about him earlier about being hardcore, about being, you know, gangster, about being, you know, pretty just rugged, but also there was a business aspect to him, you know. Clearly, as you mentioned, I think that was all done intentionally, you know, having his features on his album and then after that coming out with the G Unit group album. I think that was pretty much strategic, you know.
No, yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah.
To kind of promote the other artists and stuff like that, which and I think I looked that up too. the G Unit group album, the first group album, this would have been with Lloyd Banks and Young Buck because Tony Yayo at the time was in jail or prison, I believe. But it would have go on to do 2.7 million in album sales. So in itself was no like flop by any means. It was very successful. So and I think it just kind of solidified.
Yeah, and if it was like very bouncy, and the music was about just being on top of the world, and I love that aspect of it. You know what I'm saying? It just was phenomenal. It was a free spirit. You could hear different, unique voices. Lloyd didn't rap just like Young Buck. It didn't sound samey. Some of these groups sound samey, and they just never. None of them sounded like they were the same.
Exactly, and I would agree with that. Like Bucks was not like Lloyd Banks, and Lloyd Banks wasn't like Yayo. Like they were all different. Like I liked the songs like Stunt 101 or Poppin' Them Things. Like that was off the album Beg for Mercy. Like that like you said, it was like an introductory to who they were as a group. Like the group members, who was Banks, who was Buck, and you got to get to know them during this album. So it was great to hear them, and they all could spit at that time. So it was good to hear those guys, and the songs that they made was great too. So it was great.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would say too, it's like because for a lot of these albums, because I had to go back and I was kind of this past couple weeks, I was kind of refreshing myself with the music, and I gotta say, yeah, like that Beg for Mercy. I'm not gonna sit here and say that oh yeah, I liked every single track, but I have to admit, even the tracks that I didn't care for as much, their lyrical ability and their ferocity, like Young Buck especially on some of those tracks, he just tears some of those beats up, and so we're and the flow is there, like you could just tell these guys were ready to blow up. They were just ready to just get in the scene. So
that hunger.
Yeah.
That fire was there.
That fire. Well, I was saying, believe it or not, that actually would be Lloyd Banks' first studio album, is "The Hunger for More," I believe, right? That was the name of it.
Right. Oh, look at that transition right there! Smooth. Look at that.
No, but yeah, I mean, so, and like I said, probably done strategically, because if I want to say, if "Beg for Mercy" came out before the studio albums of Young Buck and Lloyd Banks, but I think at that point in time, fans were probably ready. Like after hearing a group album, they're like, okay, I want to see what what a whole Lloyd Banks album sounds like. I want to hear what a full Young Buck album sounds like. So
I would say so too. And for viewers who don't know, like I say, because again, just to go in detail, G Unit stood for Guerrilla Unit or Gangster Unit. It was like interchangeable at that time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, I didn't even know that. But like, yeah. And I mean, and the Lloyd, and like I said, they all had hits too. Like I said, for instance, like Lloyd Banks, I specifically remember "We on Fire." Like, absolutely I love that song. Yeah, I love that song. Like I remember, I think I might have been in 7th grade. Not to age myself, but like I might have been in 7th grade at the time, and I do remember just on the school bus, one of my well, I don't even know if it was my friend. He might have just been the only guy with a CD player at the time. And bumping that, and just those, I don't know if it's like those bass lines when the song starts and then the beat drops, and oh man, it's too nice. And 50 on the hooks, that's another thing we didn't talk about earlier, but I think another thing, because like especially when you mentioned Many Men, I mean, I think what makes Many Men good, and also like We on Fire, it's like technically he's singing, but I don't know, it's not like he's like bellowing his heart out. It's kind of just this mellow kind of methodic or very much a rhythm type singing on the hooks, and it just goes so well. It just goes really well with a lot of these beats that were being produced at the time. And yeah, I think 50 just definitely had a good ear for hooks, for sure. Something that's catchy,
Absolutely.
And they did their own stuff though. Like I said, majority of the songs they did really just featured themselves. There was obviously a couple songs that had other different features from outside of G Unit, but most of the time, like I said, they were doing their own choruses, they were doing their own stuff for every one of their songs. So it was all just inner workings mostly the whole time.
It was very in-house.
Very in-house the whole time, I would say that. And during, obviously, The Hunger for More, saying that's when we get our first introduction to The Game, because he was on a song too.
Oh, yeah, he is on that Lloyd Banks album. That's right. And also, that's the thing. Like I told you guys, I was going back and like listening to the CDs, but I was also watching a few music videos, in which some of them are pretty cool. And fun fact, it's kind of a nice little, not to be kind of ironic or whatever, but you can kind of play a game by going back into these old G Unit music videos and finding game in them. Like
Yeah.
he makes
like
these like little cameo appearances in there. And yeah, he's actually, and when I was listening to Lloyd Banks, as a 7th grader or whatever, I didn't know who Game was. He hadn't dropped anything at the time. But going back after everything and seeing him like in these like We on Fire music video, or I think he's even in I Want to Get to Know You by the
I
G
think
album.
so
I think
too.
he's in there too.
I think he is too in that music video. But yeah, like I said, I would agree with you because again, it was that introduction to him to get that little view of him. Obviously, it's like a Where's Waldo kind of moment, like you said. It's like it's like, hey, I know that dude.
I know that
He's
guy. Yeah.
famous. I know that guy. Just going back and looking at that. But yeah, like I said, just seeing the future members in it. Obviously, we didn't see Tony because his butt was locked up.
Yeah, he was locked up. You know what I'm saying?
But yeah, that's the only one really. God, don't even start. Don't even start. Did you know that the first album, The Beg for Mercy, it had Tony Yayo on the cover?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's on the brick.
He's on the bricks. I think it's like some fake graffiti
Yeah,
or
they
something.
they couldn't
Yes,
get his
you
picture
are
because he
correct.
was locked up. Couldn't get his picture because he was locked up.
Damn.
But also another video that Game was in. He was also in the in the club video too.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Was it?
towards
I
the
thought
end.
so. I thought so. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought so.
Yeah, he was in there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, good job, T.Y. Like I said, I was like thinking about that. I think that he was in that video. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. So yeah, now, and then also, I mean, because that's one thing, and we'll get to this here in just a little bit, because we have a few things to mention as far as like the up and coming and rise of G Unit and 50, but I think there also is a kind of a reasoning behind, like you were saying, Cam, about being in house. Not branching out. And I do believe that, and like I said, I don't want to jump the gun too far because we still need to talk a little bit about Young Buck and about the game. But
Tony Yayo. Make sure we
we'll touch upon Yayo. We'll touch about the other member for sure. But
man, the other member, that's what he's known as. He was a starter. He was a originator of the group.
I mean, yeah, until he's gone. But point is that with a lot of success, 50 did have a knack for making a lot of enemies. We'll definitely be having a whole segment about beef.
I don't want no beef.
You want no beef? You want no beef?
We get into that because it's not pretty. It's pretty ugly. When you're on the top, I guess. You know what I'm saying? So, but before we get there, I will say that so we've mentioned 3 members already without even trying. So let's get into it. The one that was up next was Young Buck, and
Yes,
and
solo
now
album.
he actually wasn't an original member. See, because 50 Cent and Yayo and Banks, they're from Queens, Queens, New York City. And that's where G Unit pretty much started. Now, we mentioned Yayo being gone or mentioned him being the other member. Essentially, the man was locked up. Now, I don't remember what he actually was, but all I know is that when 50 Cent and G Unit was popping on the radio, music videos were on MTV, MTV2, Yayo was kind of like, me as a kid at the time, I didn't know about Yayo. Like I hadn't been following them in the mixtape scene or the underground scene. I only knew what was in the mainstream media, and so I may have heard them reference him like in songs, right? Or he may have showed up on features, but I had no idea that this brother was like in jail or prison, and I didn't know that he had been around since day one. So, and I don't know, like in your guys is like looking into it. Did you guys come up with anything on that, or what that story was like?
So, what I got when I was, looking into the whole situation, he went to prison before the first album dropped for gun possession and bail jumping.
Oh, okay.
So that's
Okay.
what he went to prison for the situation. Obviously, him, being part of the streets and everything, that's pretty normal stuff that
Right.
that street life gives you. So it's like there's nothing unusual about the situation, really.
True.
It's it's one of those things that and he was, like I said, they did have him on. Like I said, he was on 50's first album. He was a feature on it. He
Mm.
was on G-Unit. He was a little bit of G-Unit's album because they still had some of his lyrics from before he got locked up, as I say, and he say so he was like how I say he's like a phantom during the whole G-Unit ride. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good way of putting it.
He was like one feature or two features at least on each of their albums just to say I'm still here, guys. I'm part of the group.
Right.
I would say for me it was like a mystique. Because I would
Okay, yeah.
always hear about Yayo, and they would since they were saying that he was locked up, I was like, okay. And then they also had the T-shirts free Yayo, so I was like, who the heck is Yayo? So I was anticipating on Yayo, and I was really thinking that Yayo was like this good rapper or something like that was coming out. Hey, hold on. Hold on, we gonna get there, but I'm just saying, like, so for me, so when I was thinking about Yayo in my eyes, I'm like, okay, I need to know who this Yayo guy is because they keep saying free Yayo, Yayo's locked up, we can't wait to see him get back home and things like that. So for me, that's what it was about for me as far as with Yayo. Yeah.
I would agree with you.
I think the first time that Yayo actually was like front and center in my mind was on the documentary, the Game album. And because and I'm liking the Game album, every track, and then I get to track, I think it's like track 12, and Yayo's on that song.
Of course.
I just kind of remember being taken aback, like, who was that? Like damn.
That's how they felt. That was your exact
No, I
words.
mean,
Damn.
I'm not trying to turn this into a Yayo clowning session, but it just. Like T.Y. was saying, it's like, we supposed to be hype, but I don't know what's
like it just went down. It just went downhill when he hopped on.
Yeah,
the track.
I mean,
It just,
I was like, maybe we just gonna, we're gonna check out this Game album. We'll see. Yayo's gonna get out in a year, and we gonna see what it's gonna be like.
and the funny thing about that whole situation was Tony did an interview, you know what I'm saying, when he was in jail. Obviously they interviewed him about everyone's saying free Yayo and everything. Oh, that just makes me want to go back to my books, you know what I'm saying? I want to make sure I write the hardest rhymes and hardest raps so when I get out that there is nothing but just heat when I get out. That was the exact words when the interview asked him about
Heat.
what is he going to do when he gets out. He said this heat is going to be the most best thing, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to go back, I'm going to make sure all my rhymes are top notch and everything. And that's exactly what he did when he got out. I would say.
Now, with that being said, like I told y'all, I wasn't there for the early days, the mixtape days. So I don't know what his rhymes sounded like beforehand, but can you guys take a testament to that? You guys at all? Like, do you guys remember hearing anything?
No, look, I'm gonna be honest. Like, same. I wasn't around when the mixtapes was out. All I remember at that time was the 50 Cent album, and then just things after that. But as far as like their mixtapes and stuff, I didn't really get the chance to really like listen to the mixtapes and stuff.
Isn't one of them called 50 Cent is the Future?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I remember that title just being kind of like, I guess. I guess it's not too bad. It's just.
Yeah, obviously, after listening to the original Get Rich or Die Trying, I went back and listened to some of those, those mixtapes before that. Because, again, I'm like, who is this cat that just blew up out of nowhere?
Oh, okay.
So I was curious about that stuff and everything. And that's when I got, obviously in touch with their DJ, Woo Kid. Because he's the one producing all.
Right.
Because he's the one who produced all their stuff. And obviously, all of them were on it and everything. Yeah. My favorite one is, Lloyd Banks. I like that little smooth, just chill vibe that he, kind of, persuades. Aggressiveness was just Young Buck, as you said earlier. Just Ace was just like bam, bam, bam. Like he just attacks that beat, and that's just his style.
Oh yeah, and I know, and I apologize to our audience. We kind of skipping all around, going crazy with it. So, I know we got kind of on a Yayo tangent there for a second, but Well, and that's all you need to know about Yayo. So,
Oh man.
Man, this man gonna come for me.
Man.
Listen. So
Again,
basically,
you heard him. He said he's gonna make the fires beats as soon as he gets out.
Beast.
So.
But the reason why I was saying that is to jump back. We kind of was originally started the sentence, or we started the conversation about Buck and how he was an original member. So, now for me, Buck, like I said, he was on the Beg for Mercy, right? And
Yes.
and then I just remember right after that, and again, that was the cool thing about G Unit at the time, is because it was like just hit after hit after hit, and it didn't have to necessarily be coming from one artist. Because I vividly remember, I was telling you guys earlier about my memories about hearing "We on Fire" by Lloyd Banks, and that was from the Lloyd Banks album. But then I would say about a couple months later, like, going into, I think if it was like the fall maybe or something like that, but a couple months later hearing, what's the song called? Is it called like "Let Me In" by Young Buck and 50 Cent? Yeah. And again, you get that same gritty, hard bass. It starts off with these kind of like guitar strings that are kind of bouncy. And yeah, like we were saying, Young Buck just goes off on that song. And then 50 Cent, I think he even says like, "Go shorty," like G Unit, we in this stuff again. Like he just back with the hooks, and man, it's just that energy. And so for him to come out, and he was not only coming out, but he was repping. He had the G Unit spinner chain on, like this man, for being not part of the original group, it felt like he should have been, almost. Like it felt like, this man had been G Unit for his whole life. So, but he's actually from Nashville, Tennessee. So not even from New York City. He's from the South. I think, that would have been Tennessee. So shout out to, Hypnotized Records and 3-6 Mafia and all them. But, yeah, so, like, did any of you guys, upon looking into it, like, how did he end up becoming or joining part of G Unit? This guy from Nashville, Tennessee? Because, like I said, I at the time, I didn't know anything,
So upon my knowledge, I had to do some research, and I was like, man, I didn't know that. But I had read some interviews about Young Buck, and he said that he was actually part of Juvenile's UTP records at one point in time.
Oh, really?
And so when he was there, he actually was, I think I want to say he was on a bus with a manager in New York. So the manager happened to know 50 Cent. And so they got in contact. And so Juvenile and 50 was actually about to make records together. And they was in the back of a bus. And so Buck played one of his songs to Banks. And Banks was like, he ran to 50, he told 50, he was like, "Hey, 50, you need to check this song out that Buck had made." And so when 50 heard the song, 50 was like, "Oh, I like this song. You know what I'm saying? I want to get this song." And so then, things had subsided and everything. And so the next thing you know, Buck gets signed to G Unit, and then also 50 uses that song for his album, and that the song actually becomes Bloodhound.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. So
Yes.
it was even good enough to just bake it right there on the 50 Cent album.
Right on the 50 Cent album. And so
Yeah, it was, like I said, Buck was that raw, just, I'm attacking the beat. Like, literally, that's what Buck was.
Yeah, and then another fact that I didn't know, he actually started out in Cash Money Records. He actually started out with Birdman, Lil Wayne, BG, Juvenile, all those guys. He actually started there first, but he had been there for a couple of years, but things was not working out there. And so then he left there and he just started doing his own thing. And so then he tried to go back there, but stuff wasn't working out. And so then he decided to go with Juvenile. And then when things wasn't working out with Juvenile, he decided to go with 50 and sign his contract there.
Now, and I mean, and I would say it worked out for him, at least in the beginning portion of that. But that's so interesting because, like, so I take it when he was with Juvenile at this point in time had probably already left Cash Money too.
Exactly.
Because they had their falling.
Yes, they had their falling out. And so Juvenile had decided to start his own label.
His own label and everything. I see. So, I mean, now can you imagine? I mean, because, yeah, just thinking about that, like, what would a Young Buck on Cash Money Records be in 2021? Like, I mean, granted, he could have suffered the same fate as a lot of Cash Money artists, unfortunately.
I hate to say that, but I feel like that'd be the same fate.
But then you do see, like, people like, like obviously Young Thug, that's like, one of the biggest rap stars nowadays, and then even Birdman himself always trying to, get that limelight nowadays too. He'll put out a song every once in a while, Rich Money Gang and all that. So,
right.
Yeah, that is so interesting how something like that could just easily change someone's path, you know.
Yeah,
So
but it's interesting, you know. But you never know, you know. I mean, maybe Baby and Lil Wayne decide to put him on, and he may be big over there at Cash Money. Who knows,
Yeah.
you know, because
Or
he's had
maybe-
this history with them.
you know, or if he was hanging around Cash Money for a while, and then once Lil Wayne created Young Money,
Yeah,
you know, who knows?
Who knows?
You could have seen that happen as well.
who knows?
So
Yeah, that's
It
true.
should be middle-aged money now, but you know, it's just
damn, some of that old money.
I feel like it's getting. Come on, brother. He's been. It's
No,
not
I mean,
young.
that's true,
It's
that's
not.
true.
It's not Young Money no more. It's definitely not Young Money no more. That brother has aged.
That sounds like a future episode, maybe. Future episode on the podcast. We're gonna talk about Young Money, middle-aged money, and old money.
Be looking for that. Be
Old
looking for that.
money, which
Very,
is Cash
very.
Money.
Be looking
That's
for
what we'll call
that. Be looking for that. But I just wanted to say, man, I was really I really liked the Straight Outta Cashville album from Young Buck. Like he had to Let Me In. I think he had Shorty Wanna Ride also on there.
Hell yeah.
Shorty Wanna Ride was fire.
That
was
I love
fire.
that song. To this day,
Yeah.
you can catch me at the gym running to that song. I still be running to that song.
Yeah, I love those songs, and I found out that this album actually went platinum, and I guess he broke a curse in Tennessee that Tennessee rappers couldn't like go platinum, and he was the first platinum
okay.
rapper in Tennessee.
That's
so
badass.
yeah,
That's awesome.
shout out to him for that, man.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is pretty cool. So yeah,
Again, we had 3 albums back to back to back. Like, you know,
Yes.
well, obviously we could count the 50 Cent album before that, Get Rich or Die Trying. So we had 4 albums that just went platinum, like it ain't nothing.
like it ain't nothing.
Like it ain't nothing.
Like it ain't nothing. Like straight up just platinum.
Yeah, no, that yeah, and again, like I said, I think that's just a testament of like, damn, like, you know, like it really felt, you know, especially me being younger at the time, it just felt like, man, these guys just can't do any wrong, you know.
Right.
And it doesn't even stop there, because we're gonna talk about the next successful artist that would release their album, and that would be The Game, you know, and now.
This is all you, brother. Since you
Yeah, well, I mean, it's no lie. I mean, these two gentlemen both know that you know, back in the day, especially back in the day,
Back
I
in
was
the
a
day,
huge,
man.
I was a huge Game fan.
So
like,
we gonna let this.
I would say obsessive, but you know, I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah, so we just gonna let the floor. The floor is gonna be all aces right here on this one.
oh well, no, I mean, I want your guys' opinions too. But I mean,
Just kidding.
I mean, I lay the groundwork. I mean, just basically from my understanding, it sounds like this. Now, we've talked about the previous members and like how they were a part of or how they ended up becoming a part of the group of G Unit. Now, where it was very much in-house for these guys, you know, obviously with Yayo and Banks, you know, being there, you know, in the streets and come up with 50 the whole way. And then, you know, this pretty cool, awesome story with Young Buck, you know, being on tour with them, or at least connecting with them, you know, with Juvenile, and then eventually end up signing with them. Here's where this is a little bit different story. So there's this artist, I don't know if he was calling himself when he first was coming up The Game, but basically The Game, Los Angeles, Compton, California. He's coming up, you know, on the mixtape scene, and I don't know specifics, but along the way, he basically ends up getting picked up by Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre likes what he hears, plans to, you know, be working on an album with him, and he's going to be signed to Aftermath Records. You know, this is going to be Aftermath's new artist. It's going to be on Interscope Records. Now, I've heard several stories in this process, but essentially, and I don't know if this idea was proposed by Jimmy Iovine, who is basically kind of like friend and partner with Dr. Dre over at Interscope Records, or if it was a suggestion by Dr. Dre. But essentially, I think with all the success we've been talking about with G Unit and with Game becoming this new artist, I feel like as a business move, it was kind of seen like, oh, well, we got this new young cat. We want him to do good. It's going to promote Dr. Dre's, you know, new rapper on his label. If he were to connect with this already successful just montage of a label, of label mates, of fellow rappers, and, you know, since we're all kind of interfamily already, you know, with 50 being signed to Aftermath as well, let's put Game on G Unit and package it as this mega package deal, and it'll sell ridiculous, you know, and it did. You know, I'm looking here now. looks like Game's album, The Documentary, was the name of his first studio album, and 2.5 million albums sold, right? And I think it would eventually go on to get 5 million. So pretty much immediately out the gate, Game becomes the second most selling artist on the G Unit label at this point in time. So I think it's safe to say that it was a good move. It was a good business move, at least from a making money perspective. And in my personal opinion, I mean, I absolutely love The Documentary. I think it's a great album. I mentioned that Tony Yayo track earlier, and even then, I'm not gonna harp on the guy too much. Even though I wasn't crazy about Tony Yayo's part, I think the song's called "Running." Yeah, it's like I'm running. Yeah, I liked it. I still thought it was all right.
He saved the album for me. That's.
Oh, did he? Did Yayo save the album for you?
Yeah,
Without Yayo?
It was mediocre until I heard that song, and I was like, this song is a banger.
but yeah, and I think and from the interviews and the magazine articles that I've read, it sounds like Game was, I guess, okay with the idea because the way Game kind of pitches it is that 50 came to him and was like, yo, Game, if 50 came to Game and was like, yo, Game, if you signed with us, we'd be like the modern day NWA, which again, at this point in time, I don't really know how that even relates, but because he was like, look, we're from the East Coast, Young Bucks from the South, you're from the West Coast. Like, we basically have all the pieces together on this one major supergroup. So as a young artist, Game, I don't know, he would have been 25, 24, I don't know, at the time. Me hearing this saying, yeah, it's like a mega supergroup. We got all the coasts, connected, and it's on G Unit. They're at the point in time, they're not, no scrubs. Like, they're making hits, they're making records, and their style is pretty good. It's gangsta. So I could see why Game would be okay with it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, and obviously if Dr. Dre's kind of wanting it too, why not? That's my boss, that's my manager. He's the one making the beats. It sounds like it was going to be a win-win. Now, it didn't turn out that way.
Eventually, we'll get there. We got to talk about we got to talk about the best member of the group next. But before we get to the best member,
no, we already talked about him. There's nothing else to talk about.
No, really. We got to talk about his album. We got to talk about his album.
Okay.
We got to give him respect.
So before we move on to quote unquote from Cam, the best member, I do want to say that. I think also what made Game and kind of what caught a lot of people's attention too was, like I said, I think 50 Cent, he honestly, I think 50 Cent and Tony Yayo, I might be wrong in this, but I'm trying to remember the documentary album. They are the only actual G Unit members that show up. I don't think Lloyd Banks or Young Buck actually do a feature on the documentary album.
I'm looking at it, and they don't.
Yeah,
show
I don't really. So now,
the only one I see is the Eminem was on a song.
Oh yeah, and then from I think it's like, is it called We Ain't Nothing? We Ain't or something? I think it's We Ain't.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he had tons of features. I think he had Busta Rhymes is on there with Father Like Son. He had
Nate Dogg, your boy Nate Dogg.
Oh yeah, he had Nate Dogg on several hooks on that song,
Evans.
and then. Yeah, Faith Evans is on there. Oh yeah, I think
Marsha Ambrosius. Yeah, I mean, I really do love the album, but honestly, like I think nothing against Game. Like I think Game does his thing on there. 50 Cent obviously was on there for like several hooks. He does several hooks, and that those are obviously we've mentioned before. 50's no stranger to making good hooks. But I would say too, I think a big appeal for this album for me personally is the production.
West Coast.
West Coast for sure. I mean, I love that West Coast rap, but production. I mean, because like you can easily say like, oh yeah, Dr. Dre produced on it, so it's gonna be good. But no, he's not the only one. I mean, I think Let Me Put You on the Game, one of Game's singles from the album, is produced by Timbaland, and Timbaland was pretty hot at the time too. So you had beats from Timbaland. I think he's got a beat from Havoc from Mobb Deep. That's on there. Dr. Dre, as we mentioned. I'm trying to think who else produced on that album.
Scott Storch.
Yeah, Scott Storch I think produced on there as well. So, like I said, just the amount of talented beat makers. Just Blaze on there, and that honestly is probably my favorite beat maker when it comes to the hip hop game is Just Blaze, and I think he was. That album in particular, I want to say, I could be wrong on this, but the documentary might have been one of the at least at the time, one of the last albums Just Blaze was working on, because right around then he was gonna retire, or at least quote unquote he said he was gonna retire. I know he's made a few beats for modern artists nowadays, but at the time he was gonna be kind of done. So yeah, just a lot of hype around the album, and again, I think it was very similar to maybe not as much, but I think it was similar to the 50 Cent situation where you're like, okay, we got G Unit, 50 Cent, and Dr. Dre both backing this artist. People were curious. People wanted to know. And, really at that time, there was no really West Coast artist. Like, everybody knew Snoop Dogg, but people have been knowing Snoop Dogg. He'd been around since 1992, 91, something like that, 94. So
and you still try to say problems till today.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, And then the only person I could think of at that time that was a West Coast artist, but even then had not even, well, I would say was around, was Exhibit. I think of Exhibit. Cypress Hill was still around. People knew Ice Cube, but even then, I would say he was more into acting.
Yeah.
I would say
he was more into acting at that time.
Like, I'm trying to think around that time when the documentary dropped. I remember Go to Church with Lil Jon, but
oh man, don't even. Yeah, wait.
And Snoop Dogg.
Another episode, people. Another episode. Another
the Life
episode.
and Times of Ice Cube.
Oh man, about the downfall.
That would be a
of
very
Ice Cube.
special
That's
episode.
what we're calling that episode.
but yeah, no. So I think it was just kind of a nice like answer that like the West Coast needed kind of this new West Coast, a new breath of fresh air, for the West Coast at that time. But yeah, so very successful and continued on. Like I said, this trend of G Unit just not losing. They just
it was again. This is now 5 platinum albums straight up, just back to back to back. And obviously, my favorite, obviously the most 2 popular songs was "Hate or Love It" when that first came out. That was
Hate or Love It's good.
"Hate or Love It" or "How We Do." Both featured 50 Cent on both of those songs. Like I said, those are on my most memory because again, 50 was just on fire at this time. So you had 2 songs featuring 50, and then all of a sudden, Games, with his grittiness, his streetness. Like I said, he had a whole nother flavor. Like I said, 50 was that braggadocious. I felt like, that was 50's vibe, and then we have Banks over here with that chill, like we're riding down, just doing things, just chill and everything. Then you had Young Bug over here just attacking the beat. And then you had the gang said, we're talking about gangbangs again. You know what I'm saying? We're back in the old school days, 90s.
Yeah.
We're talking about that. We're talking about that street, stuff again all day long. So you had different lanes, avenues everyone went to, and they blended so well together.
I would agree. I would agree. And that, like you said, Cam, was like How We Do and Hate It or Love It. Those are my 2 favorite songs from off that album. I love those 2 songs. And I'm gonna be honest, when I first heard about Game, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't care too much about him. I was just like, who is this dude?
Right.
But when How We Do came out, that changed my whole perspective. I was like, okay, I really like this dude now. So I liked those 2 songs. And then like what Ace was saying, Game brought the West back because the West was kind of pretty much gone at the time, because once Pac was dead, there really wasn't much West left. So when Game came onto the scene, it brought the West Coast back onto the scene, and he pretty much was like the king of the West Coast now.
Yes. Yes. I would
it was
agree
kind of
with you
just
on that situation.
Yeah, it was kind of like just somebody was needing to take the mantle and kind of push it forward, and he was the answer to that at that time. So,
and this is where the divide happened between each of us. I would say, like I said, Ace, as we could say, his, at this time, because there was 5 albums platinum, Ace would say this, the Game was on, was his favorite. Like I said, I could say that Lloyd Banks' album was my favorite of all of them, and then you, Ty, what would you say at that time?
Shoot, I would have to go with 50, man.
So like I said, each of us had different views of who we thought the best in this one super group. And that's amazing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're thinking about who the best in a super group is. Usually there's just one member that just kills everyone out of the water when you think about super group, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But no, us 3 ourselves are able to at least have 3 different members that in that group that we actually enjoy be the top person, we thought.
Right, yeah, and then they had the numbers to back it up. They were, and the lyrical ability. I mean, the beats. Like I said, it was safe to say that each one of them at that time could hold their own.
Right.
Easy, hold their own easy.
100%.
Right. I totally agree with that.
And as you mentioned, Cam, you were kind of breaking it down. Like I said, 50 Cent bringing that kind of braggadocious street gangster East Coast vibe. You had the chillness and kind of like the delivery of Lloyd Banks. You know, the ferocity of Young Buck, and then Game. You know, kind of referencing and bringing back that West Coast flavor.
Yeah.
And then we had the Yayo dance.
I remember that nicely. I remember that nicely.
You know, I mean, he bringing something to
So,
it. I mean,
Let's go ahead and start with the big
can you
Yayo
give me
topic.
the numbers on that first album for me for a second? Tell me.
Do y'all remember the hit "So Seductive"?
so seductive. So I guess we should clear the air. So this man gets. We are talking about Yayo again, and again, like I said, so he comes back, right? He is finally released from prison, and it's time. All this free Yayo T-shirts, all the mystic features, you know, and now it's time. It's album time. It's
It's
time.
album
to show and
time.
prove.
After he said he studied all the arts
Oh
of
yeah,
rap.
and of course, you know, getting the lyrical ability up. You know, he's been polishing up the raps, and the first single to come out, I think it's 2005. We get So Seductive, and I'm not gonna lie to you, doesn't do what we expect. You know, the numbers not there. Now, funny fact, and maybe this was Yayo's doing, maybe this is 50's doing. I swear, somewhere when I was looking up the album sales for So Seductive, I think it only did about 280,000
Ooh.
album sales.
Ah.
Now, if you were to Google that right now, they do a very good job of making it very difficult for you to find. So, again, I don't know why that is. I don't
Like
know.
50 just covered up the evidence.
Covered up the evidence.
Covered up the. He's like, no one ain't gonna ever see these
Hey,
results.
I ain't gonna see this, you know. So, but I do, and again, I could be wrong, guys. But all I want to get across is that the million album sales that we've seen from P4S members, that was not graced upon our friend Tony Ayo here. Okay, that he did not get to share that same success.
Again, So Seductive was probably the biggest song that I heard at the time, and
Yeah, and
it was okay. Like I said, it wasn't
like I said,
as
it
high as
definitely
I thought it would be. Again, I still would listen to it on the radio because again, it still was a decent song.
Yeah, and again, like I kind of said this earlier, and I want to emphasize that I don't mean that like if you listen to G Unit, it all sounds the same. I'm not trying to say that in a negative way, but what I am trying to say is that you can get a good vibe and a feel of what a G Unit song kind of sounds like. You know, very. To me, honestly, when I'm describing it, it's kind of cold. You know, there's kind of like a coldness in the air, a chillness in the air. There's usually like some heavy bass. Kind of gritty, but then like I said, usually there's some kind of like rhythm or melody
Bounce.
to it.
That's what I call it, bounce.
Yeah,
That
like kind of like a
bounciness.
bounce. That's right, Cam. You did mention that. So again, it makes you groove. It makes you bob your head where it's catchy, but there is kind of this dark coldness, kind of just vibe to it. And I would say So Seductive with those. It's just that bass hits you. It does have a lot of the similar elements that we've been seeing, but for whatever reason, it just didn't go as hard. I think, and again, I know we've been clowning on the guy. It could very well be maybe just Yayo's lyrics on the song just didn't, or maybe it wasn't even his lyrics. Maybe it was his delivery. Because I'll admit, for me, it was his voice a little bit. Like, again, I'm not trying to talk stuff. I'm just personally saying his voice, it takes some getting used to. It when he's rapping and his delivery is just off. It's just, for me, it's just a little off, But, that being said, I may have not been crazy about So Seductive, but I cannot deny, and mind you, this is at a time, because as we go further, Yayo is on the cusp, for me personally, of hating G-Unit, of going against
Yeah,
G-Unit.
you were doing that little side road, about to go that side road.
Yeah, I'm like, here's where I take a sharp left. Like before, where I
Yes,
was kind of
100%.
digging the music, and then all of a sudden I just go the opposite way. Yayo started coming onto the scene when I was starting to turn away from the unit. But before I do, around this time, I think the song "I Know You Don't Love Me," I actually dig that song. It's actually really catchy. To me personally, Yayo's best song ever recorded.
Dang.
And-
That's saying something right there. I
'cause
don't
50
know.
Cent's on the hook, and it's catchy. It's kind of a funny hook. 50 Cent hearing 50
Yeah,
Cent.
I would say it's a good song. I actually liked it better than So Seductive. I would
And
agree
So
with
Seductive. And also what I liked about it too is you get to hear the other members rap on it as well. You hear Lloyd Banks, you hear Young Buck, with the exception of Game. But you do
At
get to
this
hear
time.
the other members. So
I would feedback on this album, the Tony Yayo album as we call it.
and also before I'll let you continue, but I was just gonna say the
You know,
album name is
just cut me off.
no. I was gonna say the name of the album is Thoughts of what is it called? Thoughts of a
predicate felon.
predicate felon. So again, I don't know how I feel about that title, but yeah, continue, Cam.
So this is the first official album that we gotta see the two new upcoming members of the team. We gotta see Olivia on the album, and we gotta see Spiraloke on this album. Official album. Obviously, they've been on mixtapes before this, but this is the official album that we have Spiraloke and we have Olivia on this album. Official.
Okay, and then and I'm trying to think because Olivia at this time, this would have been Olivia. I knew
2005. This would be 2005. This album came out.
for Tony Yayo. Now I did know about Olivia beforehand, but the only reason why I knew about her was because she was on 50 Cent's song "Window Shopper," right? Wasn't that
That
Olivia?
is true.
Okay.
As far as I know, I think so. Yes.
Or was it Window Shopper or was it I thought Candy Shop.
It was
That's
on
what it was.
Candy,
It was
definitely
Candy Shop.
Shop.
Now Candy Shop I think had come out the year previously. I think it might have been on 50 Cent's album.
Find my way till I do. We move at God's speed, our purpose is true. We move at God's speed, our purpose is true.